How's it going, guys? I hope this is a good setup. I got my computer here, my camera here, and hopefully it all makes sense. Today we're going to be learning about 5 ways to drastically increase your website's page speed score. Here in front of me I have a website that is just your classic example of very slow loading site. If you're watching this video and you're like me, you probably have a site that you're already dealing with that you can already try this out on. First of all, step 1 is you have to know how to measure the page speed. There's 2 or 3 different ways out there. One of them is Pingdom, the other one is Google Page Speed Insights, and then another one is GTMetrix. You know, it's really nice to be able to look at the information and interpret it correctly. So first of all, let's look at the page. This is the page. We did a really simple website theme upgrade for this guy, and we're optimizing the speed now. And this is gonna be like 90% of your page speed issues that you guys are dealing with are gonna be these exact things. There are occasionally some other things that you might want to look at, like, are you using some kind of crazy slow page builder? Are you using a plugin that you have to use that's just ridiculous? But for most cases, all of this stuff is going to really help you. As I'm editing this, I realize it's a very long video, and if you don't have time to watch it, I've put together a little PDF guide that you can download that'll go through the whole process, and you can try it out later. First of all, you need to know how to use GTMetrix, and you need to know how to read it. And the way it works is you just go to GTmetrix.com and you type in the website. A perfectly fast website is going to be just a blank HTML page with nothing on it, and most websites are not like that these days. You know, most websites are what we call dynamic websites. So a dynamic website is a website that actually has stuff happening in the background to build the page in front of you rather than just being one thing. So if you're obsessed with page speed and you only have one page, then you can build an HTML version of that and load it faster. But anyway, so let's look at this. As you can see here on the Facebook.com one, it's showing us, it has a few redirects here that are slowing things down, and there's a few scripts that are just causing a little bit of a slowdown, but not really that bad. We got a B and an A, which I would consider passable for most users. So Google themselves actually state that they want users to have the first contentful paint within 3 seconds. So what that means for your site is ideally every little page that someone visits should take less than 3 seconds. And that's not too hard. Once you visit the first page, if you can get that done in 3 seconds, the other ones are not too big of a deal because of something called background page loading, which most websites have integrated. Let's go to our website and talk about how we're going to optimize it. So right now, I got a lot of issues. I got the YouTube players, which are causing major slowdown issues. And if you have anything embedded on your site externally, you can't control what that server does. And YouTube is notorious for just trying to load the entire website of YouTube. It's like an embed, or an iframe as it's called, is almost like putting another website within your website. So not only is the user trying to load your website, they're loading another website that's just in that little square. And that's how all these YouTube iframes work. So that's one. And then images, not too big of a deal. This is basically a blog layout right now. And let's see, anything else throwing up flags? Not too much. We probably have a little script down here running these. And then there's some things that are unseen, which, you know, most of this is YouTube. Like 90% of it's YouTube. And then we got some ad things, which I've talked to the customer about this, and we're still trying to decide what he wants to do for this. And there's different ways that he's going to try to use an ad network. All right, and then he also has some issues with leveraging browser catching, which means that the browser is not able to catch the page, which, if you don't know, is like temporarily storing a version of the page so that it can just load much faster. So the other thing, let me go ahead and pull this site up on incognito, and yes, you can see it loads pretty quickly. But yeah, so he's got this MailChimp embed that actually works pretty decently because it's responsive and it does really well for capturing the emails, surprisingly. We're gonna redesign this thing with Elementor, I'm pretty sure. So that's pretty much everything that's slowing it down right now. And let's talk about how we actually speed that up. So for the optimization, we're gonna be using something called WP Rocket, which is a paid plugin. There are other ways to do this that I will get into in another section. But this is the best way by far because it does everything. The non-paid methods, you're gonna have to use like 5 or 6 different plugins, and I did that for a really long time because I just was like, I don't know if I should buy this plugin. But when I bought it, it made the whole process just way easier. So with WP Rocket, let's go ahead and go to our settings. Right out of the box, just turn the plugin on, and it does a lot on its own without anything. So right here, file optimization, leave cache the same. There's nothing really to change for this unless you have a membership style website and you're wanting to save server resources. You can turn that on. Here, if we go to file optimization, obviously we want to optimize Google Fonts. Google Fonts are ridiculous. They're ridiculously slow for what they are. I mean, they're beautiful, don't get me wrong, but they're just way too slow. Minify HTML, I would not do that. You can if you want, but it's gonna potentially cause issues. Minify CSS files, would not do that either. They give you a warning that it could break things, and when they say that, it basically means it will, unless you have a website that's just like really simple. Optimize CSS delivery. So I don't turn this on, and the reason why I don't turn this on is because you can actually, when it loads, it says it right here in the description. It eliminates render blocking for faster perceived loading time, but it doesn't actually speed things up. It just makes it to where the user can see everything happening as it loads. And I actually dislike this look, but on a lot of other websites, especially if you use something like a page builder, it's gonna do really weird stuff to your loading. And just look at it. Just have a look at it while you are working on it and see if you like what it does. And what it does is when it's loading, it's gonna load pieces at a time versus throwing up one screen that has everything. And when you load a bunch of different pieces at a time, if you have a sort of complex page builder layout, you're gonna see weird stuff happen on the screen, and it can actually have negative issues on the user experience, because if a user gets caught in a place where it's loading something and then this button is actually over here when it's supposed to be here, they call that cumulative layout shift, which means the layout shifts as it's loading. And I personally try to avoid that because I don't like it, and I don't think users like it. But on your site, you may not really care. Load JavaScript deferred, I'll leave that on, and that essentially means that all those scripts we saw in this page here, not all of them because some of them are external, but most of the ones that are on the website and even some of the external ones can be deferred to the end of the loading process, because all we care about is we want the user to see the website before all this other crap loads. We really don't care if these YouTube embeds at the bottom of the page load before the user sees the top of the page. You know, it just does not matter. Safe mode. Yep. Safe mode's always a good thing. I like for things to be safe. So let's go to media. This is going to depend a lot on your image optimization settings, which we're going to go into later. But on this site, for some reason, I have it enabled because we have, with our image loading situation, we're not using a plugin, we're using a CDN, which I'm going to show later, and I'm not sure if that CDN provides lazy loading or not, so I just enable it here. And enable for iframes and videos, that is probably the single biggest setting that's going to make the biggest difference on this particular site. So right here, all these videos, it's going to help that a lot. Disable emoji. Yeah. And WebP catching. I don't leave this on because I don't, I'm not using something that converts to WebP images in WordPress. And if you don't know what WebP images are, they are sort of like a PNG, sort of like a JPEG image, but they are optimized for web layouts, and they're really small image sizes. Most computers cannot read them, and I've tried to find things to open them on Mac, but you can't really do anything with them on your computer unless you convert them first. And all of the sites I do use them when possible for faster loading, but I'm not using it with WP Rocket or their recommended method, because they are suggesting I use something like Imagify, which is one plugin. There's also a plugin called Optimal. There's another plugin called Short Pixel, and they're all CDNs that are actually kind of overpriced. And as you start to get a bunch of different software helping your site load better, it makes sense to invest more, or it makes sense to invest your money properly. Unless you just have one site, it might be easier just to throw a premium image optimizer plugin on there, you know. So yeah, so that's a setting. And then preload is enabled by default, which is awesome, because a lot of these other cache systems like W3 Total Cache, which is one of the ones that's free that I'm not really going to go over in this video, but they don't have preloading to my knowledge. So that means that users actually have to visit the pages, or you do, for it to load the cache and for it to keep the cache up to date. And preloading is nice because if you have a server like I do that has good computing power, this can all just happen right away, and your users get the most up-to-date cache file versus trying to force your server to load it each time. All right, so that pretty much covers WP Rocket, which is our first step. So now we've cleaned up things, and let's see what the speed test is after we've cleaned up those things in WP Rocket. So if you need more help and you want to upgrade your site's speed and you need extra help, join our Facebook group, WP Speed Matters. All right, so we have a B page speed score now, which is wonderful, but we can do better. Cleaning up and removing plugins that are unnecessary. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but I'm just going to say this guy is like a normal WordPress user, like all of us. We're all guilty of it. You use a plugin for a little bit, you leave it on there, and you forget about it. That's what happened here. A lot of plugins just outdated, unused. So I went in there, cleaned all that up. That gave me a nice little bump on the page. That gave me a nice little bump on the page speed score. The other thing that we're going to do next is integrate a CDN. So for the CDN, depending on who your hosting is, you can try their own CDN if you want. And some people even say that Cloudflare is a CDN, which it is, but it doesn't really do anything remarkable without, well, it does, but it doesn't do much on the free version. So the reason I'm using BunnyCDN is it is the best bang for your buck, pun intended, with the bunnies and everything. So let me log in here. The way you do it is you just create a new pull zone. It'll walk you through it, type in your domain name, and that's it. And Gijo has a great guide on this that I'm going to link in the description that tells you all the recommended settings to use. But anyway, we're going to go in here. We're going to set up all of our recommended headers, optimizer, all of that. And we're going to turn on the optimizer, which is around $10 a month, which it's on par with some of these other optimization plugins, but it's better and you can control it, and you actually might not even need it if you're responsible with your image sizes. So we just set up our pull zone, and then we have our CDN URL, which is right here, and then we go into the WP Rocket and just paste it in, and it'll start working just like that. And that's pretty much all there is to it. You'll see your images start to go a lot faster and deliver much faster, even without the optimizer turned on. So the optimizer is actually going to take the images and attempt to compress them a little bit. So here we can go ahead and see, open image in new tab, and in the browser top bar you can see that it does have the CDN delivering the image, and that's great. And it should be delivering WebP images as well. Alright, so that's pretty much everything that you should do. One thing that I did want to mention is a controversial topic. Or I guess I'm one of the few people that thinks that you shouldn't do this, but this is a controversial topic that is known as asset cleanup. So what that tool does is it's another WordPress plugin, and it's a plugin that allows you to clean up plugins, which the developer is a good guy. I have nothing against him, but what I do not like is I don't like this idea of having to clean up your plugins. Like, you should just not have them installed. And yeah, maybe there's one page that doesn't need to run your PayPal extension, right? And you want that page to be faster, but the problem with that plugin is it consistently breaks websites, because that's what it's doing. It's literally breaking your website, so it can take out one, asset or code from the page, and feel free to use it, but use it at your own risk. Like, I disagree with the usage of that plugin. And yes, I mean, that's how people consistently get page speed scores. But I disagree with that. The last thing I want to mention, which is extremely important, is your website hosting. A lot of people don't realize how important it is because of something I like to call sales. The sales teams of these hosting companies are incredibly good at their jobs, and their only job is to get people into the platform. Their job is not really to support their platform or make it better. Some are better than others, and I'm actually intentionally not going to name names here, but there is one in particular that is very popular, and you might be able to figure out who I'm talking about. But they are extremely popular, and the reason they're extremely popular is because they have a really lucrative affiliate program, and they suck because their time to first byte is really slow. This site I've had people come from them to other hosting platforms that it's just, And so the reason it's slow is because of something called shared hosting. But anyone who's running a professional website should not be using shared hosting anymore. It's just not reasonable to be using that, especially with some of these options that I'm going to tell you about. So if you're running a blog and you're just ridiculously cheap and you can only afford $4 a month or less, and you can find someone that's that cheap and it's a shared server, then it's your only option, right? But like if you just run a blog and page speed doesn't even matter that much to you, why are you watching this video? But if that's the case, then yes, you can use shared hosting. But for most websites, they have users that visit their website, and you actually want your users to enjoy your website and not, leave it because things are too slow. With all that being said, I have an image up here that's demonstrating this, but basically with your hosting, there's this thing called the noisy neighbor effect, which means that when you're on a shared server, one website might have thousands of visitors and tons of WordPress plugins, and they're going to slow down the whole server because it's all shared. You're all sharing the same resources. But there are ways around that. One of the ways is a VPS, which is the next step up, but VPSs are kind of getting more expensive depending on where you get them from. And if you go to these traditional hosting websites, like the old way of doing it with cPanel and all that, and I have nothing against cPanel, I think it works really well. But when you go to these traditional hosting websites, they are coming from an environment that used to be they're coming from an environment of rack mounted servers that they physically stored in their facility, and they used to be the cheapest way to do things, but now there is something called the cloud. And the cloud is the same thing, it's just tons and tons and tons of computers working together to make a very big version of that. So on your website hosting, if you're trying to figure out which one to use, we have 3 recommended options that are kind of my go-to. So we have the cheap option, we have a medium option, and we have an expensive option. The first option is something called Cloust, which I never use and I don't like. But why am I recommending it? Well, a lot of people are watching this from areas where things are just not the same financially as they are in the US. So you might not be able to afford more than $10 a month on your hosting. So Cloust will give you literally the cheapest possible option, and it is ridiculously fast because it's built on Google Cloud and they scale with you. It's really good, but I personally dislike it. They have non-existent support. But if you are technical and you don't have the budget, go with them. Okay, so that's the cheap option. The middle option is one that I use, which is called Cloudways. And Cloudways is good for agencies that store tons of websites on their servers. And oh man, I can't say enough good things about Cloudways. I'm tempted to just say use Cloudways for everything, but it is a little bit expensive to get into that first amount. There's nothing less than $10. So if you're a little bit lower budget and you can't afford $10 a month for your website, then it's not a great option. But if you have a lot of websites, you can do everything on one server. You can break it down based on the customer, which is what I do a lot. I have customers that need their own section, they need their own server. I also have customers that need they're okay sharing with everybody, and it really depends on the situation. But Cloudways makes it really easy to go in, clone a server, create a new server. You can do it in like 5 to 10 minutes. And essentially what it's doing is it's taking from these services, which it's DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, Google Cloud, and Amazon Web Services. It's taking from those 5 services and giving a nicer user interface that we can actually deal with. If you use Amazon Web Services on its own or one of those other ones on its own, it is cheaper. It's exactly half the cost, but you have to have someone who has a server administration background who can handle that. And to me, it's not worth the security risk. It's not worth doing that because unless I had like hundreds and hundreds of websites hosted, then it's totally not worth it. It's more worth it for me to have Cloudways, and it's just an amazing deal. So that's the second option. The third option is sort of debatable, but you might have a better suggestion for this. But the third option is for people that have no technical experience whatsoever and want a good hosting option. And I was going to recommend this one company, but I will not mention them by name because I found out that their pretty hefty priced option is actually just a shared server, literally, and it's not even based on the cloud. So what we recommend in the group for people who have a little bit more budget and are less technical is one called Kinsta. Kinsta Hosting does not provide email, but they'll probably help you set it up and help you set up your DNS to where you can have it on Outlook. That's the recommended setup. So if you have, if you want, it used to be people tried to put their emails on their server, but that's just not really done anymore. And that's an antiquated way of doing things that I really dislike. I used to like it because it was free and it was right there, but it's just not a good way to do it. And none of these options have email. So to do your emails, use Outlook, use G Suite. Another one is Rackspace, which is a cheap one. It's like $1 per email per month. Not like I told that to a customer one time and they were like, per email, we're gonna have to, whoa, we send like 10,000 per month. And I was like, no, like per email address. But so use Kinsta because we have established they are probably the number one in terms of hosting across the board, and it is a good option that I don't personally use because I have multiple sites. But if you just have one and you want performance, they're going to be the best bet, and they probably have CDNs and image things included, and they're the one that we like to recommend. There are others that are in that same realm, but it's just get your hosting on the cloud, get your hosting to where you have server resources. And the reason I say that is because from my experience, I mean, it's ridiculous how hosting can affect things. But remember when I mentioned that WordPress is built around PHP? That means that every time you do something like make a post, update your orders, update plugins, you're using your server's CPU versus just loading a page or whatever. And so your CPU has to think and it has to do things. Most servers that are shared, even some of the VPSs I've been on in the past, they just give you really wimpy equipment. And if you use something cloud-based like Cloudways, which I prefer Vultr, which is the best bang for the buck as far as just performance goes. The amount of computing power that they give you for so little cost is insane. And you'll notice that when you start updating plugins, when you start updating orders in your WooCommerce, like it's pretty ridiculous. And I would just say keep that in mind, and remember hosting has a really big impact on your page speed score as well. Well, I hope that wasn't too long-winded, but I hope you enjoyed that, and hopefully this helps you get your page speed score to that coveted A, which I was not able to reach just yet because I have a few things to clean up on this front, but Hopefully this allows you to get all of your websites up to speed and helps you understand better how page speed works and some of the myths, some of the things that actually affect it. And yeah, so I hope this was helpful.